Talk to us about supply concerns. I mean, we just heard this kind of laundry list, conflicts, droughts, climate change, all of that contributing. Now you've got a pandemic, and we're also hearing about logistics. What's your take on all of this?
Yeah, so it has really disrupted global logistics, China included. It's made it much harder for farmers to get their food to markets and for those markets to sell the goods to the rest of the world. A number of countries have been suffering from this: the U.S., China, Australia, India, Europe. The list goes on. And there's trouble in terms of exporting the goods, just getting them out to other countries. And then once they're in other countries, trying to ensure that they get transported from one region to another. And so China has experienced issues in terms of shutting down restaurants. That's been one issue that has fed into demand. And also in terms of supply, it's experienced issues in terms of fluctuating prices that have led to a lot of volatility for the farmers.
Yeah, it's interesting because China obviously dealing with this pandemic ahead of everybody else, also emerging its economy coming out sooner. What are some of the food shortages they've seen? What are shortages they could be dealing with moving forward, do you think?
Right. So some of the shortages, well, China actually has a pretty large self-sufficiency in terms of grain. But everything else, in terms of meat in particular, has been really hard to get out because of so many transportation disruptions. It has experienced difficulties in terms of cash crops, so non-grain crops, which covers an extensive variety of food types. And the government has intervened to try to alleviate some of these issues. I'd say that it's probably done a lot more than some of the other countries that are going through the coronavirus issue. For example, setting up subsidies to revive agriculture, providing specific types of grains and oils and meats and vegetables during the shutdown in Hubei province. That was very helpful. And also Alibaba stepped in to set up a fund so that farmers could actually find markets that are closer to them. So all of these have really helped to alleviate the situation, but the situation is still going on there.
There's this focus this week on this pork processing plant in South Dakota. The state's governor, of course, resisting the more proactive stay-at-home orders. The Smithfield plant, according to the New York Times, is the largest single hotspot of the coronavirus cases now. Sick employees making up almost half of the state's cases. If we start seeing cases like this in plants where staff can't go to work, the pork obviously doesn't get to the consumer. You also see, we had a story last night from Oxnard, California, these field workers all clustered together. If it starts to spread there, I mean, you can kind of see how this could kind of snowball. What's your greatest fear?
Well, my fear is that, supply and demand will not be able to come together. Certainly, Smithfield is a really bad situation, but I think that a lot of this can be prevented by providing workers with the, proper preventative types of masks and gloves and using the correct procedures as well. And this is a really important part of the process in terms of coming from the company, coming from, governments to ensure that these things are happening. So I think that, given the correct measures, this type of spread of the coronavirus within these workplaces could be slowed to a reasonable extent. I think that the main concern right now is in terms of logistics, in terms of getting the food to the right people. And as we heard about, some of the farmers are dumping their milk all over the world. This is a common issue. And so those supply chains really have to be, fixed to some extent in order to make this problem go away.
What about policymakers? Is there anything that they can do to be proactive to kind of stem any problems before they actually get really kind of out of hand?
For sure. I think, one of the biggest things is implementing protective measures to ensure worker safety and also to prevent additional outbreaks. That is the number one thing. Also to ensure that quality control is happening. And then to sort of allow some of these logistical problems to be overcome, perhaps not to close off borders to food shipments and not to diminish the number of exports that are going out, allowing for free flows of trade while ensuring that food security remains at home. Those are sort of important measures that need to be taken into account because the logistical aspect is the most important issue right now.
Sarah, thanks so much for your insights. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.